Welcome to Candler in Conversation, the podcast where Candler School of Theology faculty, staff, students, and alumni share their stories, their scholarship, and the theological questions that shape them. The show is proudly produced by the Candler Foundry, and I'm your host of the Scholar Unscripted series, Krista Lee. Dr. Tony, welcome to Candler in Conversation. I am honored you're here with us today.
So happy to be here. Thank you, Krista.
Of course. Now, this is our Scholar Unscripted series. So for the audience to know, these questions you do not know what I'm going to ask you today. So this is about just learning about who you are behind all the great work that you do.
Sounds great. Let's get in.
So my first question, what do people say when they hear what you do? Like, you're a theology professor, you're Grammy nominated, you're a composer. Like, those pockets are very different. So how do people react?
Yeah, well, let me go back and say the kind of paradigmatic example is like when I'm in an airplane seat and someone wants to make small talk and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, whoa, what thing do I pick? Because the second I pick a thing, they're going to see me through that lens, right? So if I say musician, often the next question is, oh, like in a band, or do you play an instrument? What instrument do you play? And I'm kind of like, okay, so now I'm going to go into like, I write church music, and that's going to be a whole box that they're going to put me in. And then if I say I'm a professor, next question will be of what? And then following answer will be theologian. And then they'll be like, oh, like of all religions or a specific, so it kind of like unfolds like that. But it's such a great question that you ask, because I'm constantly like navigating that, like, man, I don't want to be in any of these boxes, not because I don't like value both vocations, but like immediately it kind of limits, I think, how people see you. And I really see my vocation as very expansive. So I don't know, different people, I mean, I've had all kinds of reactions to those questions, like they span the gamut, but I find both music and theology tend to like activate a lot in people, sometimes really positive, sometimes really negative, but it depends on the person and what they're kind of bringing to it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
To your point, I do think that when people hear one title, they kind of go into that box. So if I talk to anyone and I say, oh, I'm a creative producer, then they'll probably ask me technology questions. If I say, oh, I'm a preacher, then they'll ask me ecclesial-related questions. But it just depends on the person and the thing. And so I do think it's important to share all of who you are, even when you're in those moments, so that they can see, no, I can operate in multiple boxes.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think the good part of it is like people want to connect, right? So they're kind of like, they want to take whatever you've given them and give you something back. And I think that's the beautiful part of it. But there's always that part of me that wants to resist. But I'm also X, but I'm also like this.
Yeah.
And don't think of me just like that. So I'm kind of always thinking about how I answer that question, actually.
I want to dive into music.
Yeah.
Where does music start for you? Like, was it in the church? Did you always have a love for music? Just kind of take us back to early Dr. Tony.
Yeah. Way before Dr. Tony.
Yeah, way before Dr.
Little
Tony.
Little Tony. Tonito, as it were.
Tonito. I love that.
That's what my family called. It still calls me, actually, sometimes, depending on the person. Music was always kind of around me. I had, like, not in my immediate family. Neither of my parents are musical. They love music, but they're not musical. But I had like grandparents and aunts and things that sang around the house. I had aunts that sang in like 3-part harmony at like Christmas parties, Christmas carols, stuff. And I was always like, this is magical. And I'm talking like when I'm in like kindergarten and first grade, I was just like lit up by the fact that people were in front of me making music. It was incredible. But the first kind of thing that led me into it was one of those aunts actually would hear me singing around the house. Like kids sing all the time. They just sing naturally. They're uninhibited, right? And she liked my voice, like, which is so funny to think. I was like in 2nd or 3rd grade, and she's like, you have a really beautiful voice. And I was like, thanks. But here's the thing. She asked me to sing at her wedding. Yeah. And my mom was like, I don't know. Do you really want a 3rd grader singing at your wedding? Which I think is such a funny response. Like, my mom was like the opposite of a stage mom. She was like, yes, put him up there. She's like, I don't know. Like, it's the thing, And my aunt said, well, listen, why don't I go get the sheet music? He can take it to his, music teacher at school. She can teach it to him. And if he's comfortable with it, he does it. If it turns out to be a bust, that's fine. So she went and bought the music. It's from, do you know the musical West Side Story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's One Hand, One Heart from West Side Story was that first song. I can still remember what the sheet music looked like. It was kind of orange. She bought it. I took it to my music teacher. I learned it and I sang it at her wedding.
Wow.
And it was the first time I really sang in front of people. And I remember the drive from the wedding liturgy to the reception. I said to my mom in the car from the back seat, "Do you think other people are going to ask me to sing at their weddings?" And she's like, "No, you're in third grade." That was the first thing,
Yeah.
that led me into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And would that young man be surprised at all that you've achieved now? Like, from that moment, did it spark an interest that you were like, "No, I'm going to go after music. I'm also somehow going to end up in the church." Like, what was that like?
Yeah. I had no idea what that young boy would think. I just know that it activated something in me immediately.
Mhm.
But then the next connective thing, I grew up in a very small town in southern Minnesota. And, one of the benefits of growing up in a small town or being a part of a small church is that, it's not as professionalized. You don't have all of the access. You don't have all of the well-paid people doing stuff. And so you just need folks to do things, right? And so I started singing and actually leading as a cantor and soloist in fourth grade at my church. And that was a place to sing, it was a place to make music. So it became the first consistent way for me to connect musically.
Mhm.
And so for it to bring together so much of, my relationship with God, my relationship with the community, I really see so much flowing out of that experience
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. What is it like to teach now, to teach worship and music and liturgy? How do you teach something that's so embodied, like in an academic setting in the classroom?
Oh, what a great question. Embodied. I think we spent the last 5 weeks on that very topic in
Oh,
my
lovely.
in my worship course right now, my liturgy course. Um, I think it's such a gift to teach worship, to think about worship. I often begin the class by reminding folks that, and this is no offense to all of my Bible folk out there, everybody doing amazing stuff, but most people's um, experience of God, experience of the church takes place in an hour, or if you're doing it well, a little longer on Sunday, right? And that is the place where their convictions, their culture, their understanding of how we relate to God is most deeply embodied, is in our worship, not just kind of contemplating, but actually being present in community, singing, hearing the word preached, even the gestures of worship, the smells, the sounds. So asking people to really take seriously that diversity of things that happens in worship is a real privilege because I also say how we think about those things can heal and they can harm,
Yeah.
right? They can lead us closer to God. They can lead us much further from God and more from one another. So taking seriously what we do as a gathered community to me is deeply a part of my own vocation.
Yeah. How do you help? You named something that's very important. Like church trauma is a thing for many people, which can affect how we receive liturgy. It can affect the way that we worship. So, how do you manage in an academic setting having students from various backgrounds? Do you ever have students who are a bit hesitant or it's hard for them to get engaged because of what their backgrounds may have been like?
Yeah, I think, gosh, what an insightful question. I think everyone comes to worship classes with a different set of embodied experiences, perhaps more than any other thing that is taught here,
Hmm.
because we all come with this formation that we don't even know that we had. Even our favorite hymn
Hmm.
is something that is the most far from universal thing that you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
So I often start the class by asking people, I give them a series of questions, tell me your favorite hymn or a hymn you hate and
Mm.
why. And or an experience of worship where you felt connected or where you felt ex- excluded and hurt and why. And we have this right from the front. It surfaces all the ways in which our own bodies, our wonderful experiences, our traumatic experiences, the ways our cultures have formed us, all shape how we're thinking about this question. And so I try to approach it not with a utopic vision in mind that everyone has had an amazing experience of Christian worship. Um, but instead trying to get them to surface their own embodied experience of it over time. And then that opens up really rich questions of one another. But you're right, it's hard, especially denominationally, so diverse, just different ways of thinking about how we should pray together, how we do pray together. I've grown to absolutely love the conversations we have here, though. And I think they're conversations that I just simply would not happen in any way similar in like a monolithic, like I'm Roman Catholic. If I was just in a Catholic school and with all Catholics, there'd be great conversations, sure, but they would not be the same. They would not challenge us in the same way. And I have learned so much from my students, and I truly believe we learn from one another in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that a good teacher, a good professor is also willing to learn from the people who are in your classes. And you are well loved on this campus. You never hear Dr. Tony and the students are not excited. So I know that what you do matters here. And so I thank you for that. I want to ask you a little bit about your book. It draws on your grandmother's home altar and the hymnals of your childhood in particular as theological resources. So when did you first realize that your life was good research material?
Whoa, that's a great question. Uh, there's a famous quote. I can't remember offhand who said it. I think it was a musician. I think it was Miles Davis, now that it's coming to me, is that it takes you a long time to sound like yourself. And I think of that when I think of that book, especially the things you're pointing to, the hymnals, my grandmother's altar, because the first attempt at writing that book did not include those things. It was very much like in my head and in the sky. And writing drafts of it, it felt so, I was talking theoretically about materiality instead of actually talking about the material. And it's like, why don't you go back to yourself and like, what is most true for you? How have you and the people in your life encountered God most fully through the material world? And man, it was actually really hard to do that. I don't know what it is. Sometimes academia can kind of malform us in certain ways and get in our minds that the world needs something other than who we are. And getting back in touch with the fact that no, bringing the fullness of who you are to this work, this project, is a lifelong journey. And for me in that book, it was really hard. The part about my grandmother's home altar, it's very short. It's like 10 pages, but it took me like 3 months to write that because it was like getting closer and closer to something so true and so vulnerable that I actually had to be quiet and listen and not read a lot of books, honestly. But once that was unlocked, wow, I learned something about myself and about what I want my work to do from it.
I believe that getting back to yourself takes time.
Yeah.
And to your point, it took 3 months to write 10 pages, but they were 10 profound pages. And I think it's a reminder for all of us that sometimes we need to slow down, just even with ourselves, to truly even know what we sound like. I know as a student here at Candler, not having a theological background, I didn't realize it, but for a time, I was very performative and I tried to sound like what I thought you're supposed to sound like in theological spaces. And it wasn't until I realized that wasn't working that I sat down and I said, well, no, Krista, like, who are you actually called to be in this space? Like, who has God called you to be? And then from that moment on, it was a hard departure. But from there, I think God blessed everything else because I was finally doing what God called me to do. So thank you for that reminder.
I know this is unscripted, but what do you think it was that was causing you to feel like you had to perform a particular kind of thing?
For me, my background at Spelman was in biology. And so I'd only had one religion course under my belt when I came here for my MDiv. And I felt like everyone that I spoke to either grew up in the church, they had family in the church. They're like from a line of 9 pastors.
There's always someone
There's
else
always
who's doing it better.
Exactly. Like all of the things. And then when I got to these classes, there were theological words that I'd never heard before. And I felt like everyone was able to live and exist from experiences that they've had. And I didn't have those same experiences. I felt like in worship, prayer sounded a certain way and the music sounded a certain way. Even the way we say amen or amen. I feel like there were certain
Amen or amen,
Yeah,
right? Even
exactly.
that, yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, what's the difference?
Yes.
So I was having um a lot of those questions. And so I felt like the way to figure it out was okay, just like do what everyone else is doing. And then I quickly realized that wasn't right and it wasn't working. But I think because I didn't know what else to do, I developed almost a fake it till you make it mentality.
Yes. And how many of us go through like large stretches of our life like that? So I'm glad you figured it out in 3
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, it was through failure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many good things
Yeah.
happen from failure,
Yeah.
actually.
That is
Mhm.
true. Okay, so I want to ask you, what is one thing that was a failure in the end, but it ultimately worked out really well
Oh my goodness.
that you're okay with sharing?
Yeah, right. Right. Relationships are off the
Right,
table.
right, right, right.
Um, gosh, that's like a profoundly challenging question. I mean, I'm gonna answer it less like dramatically than I might.
Yeah. You can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just say that like I feel like I've written a lot of songs, like
Mhm.
hundreds of songs, and so many of them have been a kind of a failure. Like, and I mean, I don't know what that means in one way because who's deciding what's failing, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, amazing things happen through failure. Some people connect through songs that I've written that I consider failures. It's like, oh, well, something's happening there still. But to bring it back to your question,
Yeah.
I think the attempts that have failed have inevitably always led me to ask a question that has led to something deeper and more
Mhm.
profound. Um, the songs that I've written that have not felt quite true to me or what I wanted to say or just I just don't feel right about have ultimately led me to ask a question like, what do you want to be writing? What do you want people to be singing? How, what is it you want to leave behind? And that only comes through failure. Like
Yeah.
nobody ever writes, like just like
Mhm.
the book. I mean, like, nobody ever writes the perfect first draft. I mean, Anne Lamott talks about this, right? The quote unquote crappy first draft is like part of the process. There's no other way but through. And I think all writing is like you have to be committed to failure.
Mhm.
Like there's just no way through.
Yeah. What's amazing about that response is I'm thinking about the fact that in 2015, you wrote for the Pope. And so for someone who's been given like this esteemed honor to also name that some of my failure has been in writing, I think it's a profound reminder to all of us that sometimes you can fail, quote unquote, and learn from even the things that we're extremely gifted at doing.
Yeah, I mean, let me even connect it even deeper there.
Yeah.
When the initial invitation that came to write that particular psalm for
Hmm.
Pope Francis's visit, his
Hmm.
first mass that he celebrated in the U.S., um, was the committee that was preparing this enormous liturgy and visit had come across this very short psalm refrain I had written, Spanish and English, and it was a mass in Spanish and English. It was going to be bilingual. And they said, we'd love to commission you to either expand this and like write verses for it or write something new. That they gave me that option. And what's so funny is the thing that they found that led them to this invitation is something that I consider a failure. I was like, well, we're not doing that. And so in
Wow.
that, kind of really took 8 meters of music, but they were like, this is the kind of thing we're looking for. I was like, wow, I can't believe that thing led to this.
Mhm. It's a reminder that sometimes we don't truly understand how gifted we are, and I think we're our worst critics
Mhm.
sometimes, especially when it comes to launching and starting new things. So I'm happy that that body of work made it out there and it led to that invitation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just how things might resonate with different people in different
Mhm.
ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. When you got that invitation and you realized like, okay, we don't want to do this, like I do want to do something new. Looking back on that experience now, how has that shaped how you moved forward from that time? It could be as a musician, as
Yeah.
a professor, as all of your hats.
How that moment of writing that song
Mhm.
for the Pope.
Mhm.
I don't know that it has shaped how I've moved forward. I think that particular moment just brought together a lot of strands of my identity that felt poignant to me. The Pope at that time, he was making the journey to the Americas, and his first stop was Cuba, actually.
Yeah.
My father was born in Cuba, proud Cuban American. And it was also the first Latin American Pope. Something deeply meaningful to all Latinos, especially who are Catholic. So to have the Pope coming to the Americas, first stop in Cuba, where my father took that short flight to Miami, first Latin American Pope in DC, for me as a Cuban American to be able to contribute to that was, some people say, oh, the honor of the music. Yeah. And it was, but for me, there was something like so much deeper about that.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, not just a Pope, but this Pope,
Yeah.
and how this Pope has been so meaningful to me and the journey that he made that led to it. Chef's kiss. I mean, it was a beautiful moment of so many of the strands in my life kind of coming together.
Yeah. I personally like to call those God-ordained moments.
Amen. Yeah.
Because I don't think there are just certain things we can't write.
Yeah.
And as you said, it was pulling together so many strands in the right moment at the right time. And I always believe there's something divine about that.
Yes, absolutely. Providential.
Yeah, providential. Yes, very providential. Speaking of providence, you've landed here in life. You've done so many wonderful things. What have you not done yet? What's still on your list?
That's a great question because it's something that I'm kind of in like a listening mode right now. The world is hard right now. There's a lot of woundedness. There's a lot of people in pain. And I feel like on a daily basis, I feel like I'm like feeling that. And so I'm like, I've been in a really listening posture for what's next for me, like creatively. I mean, I have projects, that I've committed to that I will do.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the next thing that I really want to do, I feel like all along the journey so far, they've kind of emerged organically. Like it's never been like, and now I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like emerged. And right now I'm in a period where I'm listening for that next thing, to be quite honest, and trying to be patient for it. And trying to listen carefully to what I like. Part of my vocation, both as a composer and a theologian, I see it as listening for what I think the church needs, right, in any given moment. And I'm trying to listen very carefully for that right now.
Yeah. You touched on a word that I believe all of humanity can work on, patience. So how do you patiently wait? Like, what is your practice of patience?
Not well. No, I would say that I've grown a lot in my patience over time. I used to be so impatient for just like the next thing, and it had to be done the way I wanted and in the order, and everybody had to do it the way I wanted.
Same.
Yeah.
You're in good company.
Okay. We can go to group therapy together.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, I think a lot of my theological work is trying to love the church not only as I imagine it to be, but actually as it is. The actual people that comprise it, right? Because we have this thing in our head, whether it's the church writ large or a worship service or even a classroom, and we go in with this utopic vision, and then, there's actual people that are different than us with very different ideas about what this whole thing is. So like that, I'm learning to practice being at peace with the chasm sometimes between how I imagine things are going to go and how they actually go. And that for me, and even receiving it as a gift. Yeah. When people act differently than I expect them to act.
Yeah.
When situations go differently than I expect them to go, and not just be okay with it, but actually be like, wow, what can I learn from this? And that is how I'm learning to practice patience right now.
Yeah. I need you to know you're speaking to my soul now. No, because when you said loving the church as it is and not necessarily how we see it, when I think of some of even the church wounds I've had to navigate, it's been because I have not seen the church like as it is and been able to connect and operate and even synthesize moments based off what it is. But I was angry or even impatient because what I thought it was and the reality of the moment were not the same. And so, and I know your students even have had this experience with you of being in your classes and you giving them space to work through that,
Mm.
so that they can be faithful servants, because a faithful servant is a servant that knows where they're serving and what the people are like and what they actually need. Um, and sometimes we can become so disassociated that we just start doing what we think people need and we stop studying the church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so much of my own journey with the church, especially as a Catholic, is rooted in trauma. Like,
Mm.
I, I came of age early. I mean, I graduated from college around the time when um, the sexual abuse crisis in the church really came to the fore.
Mhm.
I was like in my early 20s working in a Catholic church.
Yeah.
Talk about shaking you out of any
Yeah.
ideal vision of what the church is. And so that really helps me not romanticize things, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's
and
beautiful.
also not excuse them neither, but to see, okay, this is the truth of this community of people that's fallen and imperfect and beautiful at times and faithful and, bringing the casserole to the grieving,
Yeah.
family and being there for this impossible situation. And also at times really enacting harm. So
Yeah.
living with all of it and seeing God at work in and in spite of all of it is a lifelong practice, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah. Dr. Tony, thank you. Just thank you to that 12-year-old who sung at his unsweating and everything else that has happened after. You are a gift to Candler. You're a gift to your students. You're a gift to the world with your music and just the way that you're able to not only embody, but teach others in a way that is faithful to who you are. So I just thank you. And I thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Krista.